Welcome to Backyard Cigars. I decided today to finally take out this Candela cigar that I've had in the humidor for nearly 8 months or so. And it's been stored at about 65, 66 RH. It will not be inside the humidor when I do my humidor peak coming soon, but I wanted you to see it now. And this is the Illusione 888 Candela Churchill Vitola. It measures in at 6 3/4, just a little bit under the 7-inch standard for the Churchill, and it measures a 48 ring gauge, just a little bit more, and probably just the new standard for the Churchill Vitola. And this is, of course, a double claro, aka Candela, aka American market wrapper. And it's got a Nicaraguan binder and a Nicaraguan filler. So it is a Nicaraguan puro. And this, of course, is from Dion Giolito of Illusione Cigars. And this cigar was actually released, 11 years ago. 2011 is when this cigar was released. And there were some ripples because their Cigar Scoop wrote some articles on how Pete Johnson of Tatuaje Cigars took exception to another cigar maker releasing a Candela cigar on the heels of this release. Now, Tatuaje Cigars has a close relationship with Illusione Cigars. They are friends, and Pete Johnson took exception to this other cigar maker putting out a Candela wrapped cigar, and I believe it was also Nicaraguan, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But first I want to talk about this cigar. Now, I'm not going to rehash all of the history involving the Candela wrapper or Candela cigars, not all of it, because I did a very extensive video on that. And if you are interested in it, while I cannot post the link in the description, I would gladly send you the link and then delete it. And that was my more extensive video on Candela wrapper, where I go in depth on the Candela wrapper, because it is a part of the history, a deep part of the part of the history of cigar history. And that just makes sense. No, it's just part of the cigar history, and it presented an opportunity for cigar makers to make a lot of money, because it just didn't take a long time. You didn't have to keep the tobacco for as long a period of time as you did with other tobaccos. You could rush this out there, at least the wrapper. You could, and let's see what it's like. I mean, I'm already seeing a little bit of a peeling at the top. Now, I've smoked a few Candelas in the last 2 years. Arturo Fuentes. You've got the Espinosa Wasabi, which I thought was super spicy, but hence the name Wasabi, right? And that had like a double wrapper on it. Interesting. I haven't made my mind up on what this experience is going to be like, because it's only an inch in. But to date, the closest that I've had to an old-fashioned Candela has been the Arturo Fuente, which is like a $5 cigar, something like that, and it was pretty good. But this one right now is just started, very general tobacco flavors, some sweetness, and just a hint of pepper, just a hint. Very nice aroma on it as well. It kind of matches the flavor, where you get like these sweet floral aromas, and you get a little bit of that in the cigar just off the first inch as it's just dropped. And I could explain a lot of different things in regards to how the tobacco is put into the barns, and then you have heating process that takes place for a certain amount of days, because you want to keep the green color, right? But I'll let Gustavo Cura who is the operations administrator for Oliva Tobacco Company in Tampa, and they grow candela in Ecuador and in Honduras. And he says the heat has to start slowly. To make candela, the barn has to be properly prepped. The walls of the wooden barn are wallpapered and with cardboard or paper to seal the cracks. The barn is loaded with freshly harvested tobacco, and the vents at the bottom of the barn are opened, encouraging air to flow out of the roof vent, known as the doghouse, which is always open. The propane heaters or charcoal fires are lit, and the heat slowly rises, taking the moisture out of the leaves. The objective is to get the air flowing through the tobacco up and out of the doghouse. Within 2 hours, the heat will be at about 90 degrees, and by hour number 3, it will rise to about 100 degrees, always gradually increasing the heat, says Cura. After 40 to 48 hours, the tobacco has wilted. Then it's time to unleash hell. The leaf is dry at this point, save for the stem, which is a stubborn beast. The stem takes much more coercing to dry out than the rest of the plant. The farmers shut the bottom vents in the barn and crank the heat up to 165. Cura remembers losing control a few times and watching the temperature range to 175. I was just about to talk about that, but he mentioned it. To blast the remaining moisture from the stem. The final step lasts for about 1 day and bakes the tobacco as dry as a potato chip. It's hot as blazes in there, says Cura. It's like being in Arizona. Reach up and touch the leaves in a normal tobacco barn and they feel like gummy, cool handkerchiefs. Do that in a candela barn, assuming you don't drop from the Death Valley conditions, and you'll be greeted with 2 eyefuls of shredded tobacco. After 60 to 72 hours total in the barn, the chlorophyll has been locked in the leaf and the tobacco is done heating, but needs to be rehumidified so that it can be safely removed from the barn. Workers open the barn's vent doors and windows unless it's windy, allowing the nighttime dew to make the crispy leaves moist again. If the climate is too dry, they bring in a steamer. Then the leaves are taken down, sorted and graded, and put into boxes, ready for storage or for rolling. The fire curing eliminates the need for fermentation and aging, cutting months and even years off the typical process. Quirks do exist. Sunlight will make the leaf lighter. The heat will darken the color. Candela wrapper can't be stored in normal tobacco warehouses. Instead, it's kept refrigerated. Water can stain it. So, a roller has to know what he's doing in order to make a candela cigar by hand. Because it's the process that makes candela, rather than the seed or country of origin, candela wrappers are grown in a host of countries. You want tobacco that's either shade grown or grown in a place like Ecuador, where there's no sunlight, says Ernesto Perez Carillo. Candela is or has been grown in Connecticut, Cuba, Ecuador, Florida, and Nicaragua. And for more than 2 decades, it was the only type of wrapper grown in the Dominican Republic. Not all of the leaves of a plant make a good candela. The tobacco up top of the candela turns a dark green in the curing. And it's not what they're looking for, says John Oliva Sr., who runs Oliva Tobacco. John Deere green, that's what they call it. So the other candela color, Oliva says, is the 7-Up bottle green. And you only have really 3 colors in candela: a yellowish green, a dark green, and a green. Like many firsts, the creation of candela seems to have been an accident. Farmers in the Partido region of Cuba, where the process originated in the 1940s, sometimes used heat in their barns to combat excess humidity. If the temperature rose too high, the tobacco from the lowest positions on the plants turned green in the heat, says Frank Llaneza of Villazon and Company. People enjoyed the look and the flavor. Rest in peace, Frank. Stanford Newman wrote in his book, Cigar Family, that only 5% of Cuba's wrappers turn green under normal curing conditions. While extremely well received, the Candela cigars were rare. Cuban farmers later perfected a way of turning an entire barn's worth of wrapper green, and by 1958, Candelas were the hot cigars in America. Farmers love Candela because it goes from seed to cash at a blistering pace. Unfortunately, that love has not been shared by consumers for decades. even by most of the people in the cigar business. Perez Carrillo's experience with his first Candela was much like most people's initial flirtation with a bottle of cheap tequila. I was about 18. At the time, I was playing drums and I had a Mustang, he says. I got into my Mustang and I lit a Candela Panatela. He had more than a half-hour drive to a gig, and he figured he would have to do a little research on the way, finding out why people so enjoyed the green cigars his father made. He kept the windows up. I really wanted to get the aroma of the tobacco. He smoked the cigar all the way to the show, and he began playing on stage. He made it almost an hour. Then he got sick. Perez Carrillo still smokes more than his share of cigars, but the few green La Glorias he makes are not frequent flyers in his cigar case. It's not a regular smoke of mine, he says with a chuckle. And so basically, that there you have it. Just a snapshot there of the history. But if you want more on the history, you can of course ask me, or you can search my videos, and you will find that within the last year I did a very extensive video on Candela wrappers. And I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Candela wrappers because I remember my grandpops smoking many of them. They weren't his favorite by any means, but I think that they were nice, mild cigars to start off the day for him. And as for me, equally, I'm starting off the day in this morning with a Candela. And I've already had something to eat and coffee about over an hour ago. So I just figured, you know what? I'm going to light this up and share this experience with you. But more than anything, let's go back to, and I'm not trying to rehash a beef, okay? You don't hear about too many beefs within the cigar industry. And I think it's, in a way, a lot of people, just don't want to hype that up because this isn't this type of, but it happens, right? You have beefs within the cigar industry, or you have disagreements that may lead to something else. I've mentioned many times how Arturo Fuente has, sued a lot of different cigar makers over the years for infringing on the whole X, and just everything behind Opus X, and he's very protective over it, and understandably so because of the history and how he was sued for that. So it's kind of, but look, I'm not gonna get into that right now. We'll talk about that another time when I'm smoking an Opus X. But right now I'm smoking this Candela and I'm liking it. I'm liking it so far. It's mild, sweet, it's earthy, general tobacco flavors. Not much more else to it just yet. Construction's been pretty good. I did get a little peeling at the top, but it's not a big deal. It's not affecting the draw. Draw's fine. Everything's fine. But I wanted to go back to the whole thing in 2011 when Pete Johnson took exception to Viaje pretty much releasing their white label project Candela not long after Dion released this Illusione back in 2011. And I think he made his statements in an interview, and it was covered by Cigar Coupe, as I mentioned before. And what he was trying to say was, I think Dion has made Candela cool again, and he's done great work with it. And I just think that he should have his time in the sun. And, he kind of didn't like the fact that, Andre Farkas and Viaje Cigars had copied and put out a Candela cigar. But Cigar Coupe, their opinion was that they disagreed with that because they said, hey, they're very limited releases. It isn't like there's a whole lot of Candela going around for everybody. And you don't have that access to the cigar. So it's good when more than one brand releases a Candela cigar in this case. One person commented that, hey, at the end of the day, no one cares whether there are 3 Candela releases. If all we want is to find a good cigar, and if one of them happens to be good, then great. And if we can't find one and we find the other, then great. But what's more important is that they're releasing good cigars. That's really what it comes down to. But look, Dion and Pete Johnson, they close relationship, so I understand why that irked Pete a bit back then. I'm sure he probably was just, expressing himself and very candidly, as Cigar Coop mentioned, and this was over 10 years ago. But yeah, it came off that way, and you know what? He wasn't the only person that felt that way. I will tell you this right now that I found an article from a site called the Cigar Smokers Journal. I'm not just blowing smoke, and this was from March 16th, 2011. And he writes here, for me, Viaje is the most annoying, frustrating company out there. How many limited release sticks will they release? Today's review is of the Viaje white label Project Candela, which follows up the epic Illusione Candela. I guess having your stuff copied is a form of flattery, but a Louis Vuitton bought in Chinatown is still a knockoff. Did Candela smokes exist before Illusione? Yes. But when you have a bit of a reputation of copying others' ideas, people question you. So it's safe for me to say that today's cigar is a cheap imitation of the Illusione Candela. Does this make it a bad cigar? Read on, my friends. And look, I won't get into what he reviewed. That's his review. You can look it up if you want. I've never had a Viaje white label Project Candela from them. I've never had it, so I couldn't say. Um, but what I can say is that this person here, no affiliation to Pete or Dion, uh, felt the same way. And I think a few other reviewers also felt that release on the heels of this cigar back in 2011 was a little distressing to some. A lot of people felt like let Dion have his time in the sun. But again, I'm going to go back to Cigar Coop and say that I agree with them on the fact that, hey, it wasn't a wide release, this cigar. It wasn't a wide release. It was very hard to get in the first few years that it was out. A lot of people mentioned that even cigar shops that carried a lot of Illusione cigars did not have it in stock, could not keep it in stock. It was flying off the shelves. And that was sort of a rebirth in the Candela movement back in 2011. Now, fast forward here to 2022, and I don't think the Candela has really taken off in a way that anybody, thought it might have back in 2011. That's just the way it is. Palates are finicky. It's like clothing. You want to rehash bell bottoms, but some people are gonna wear it. They want to be different, or they want to be nostalgic. Other people are gonna say, no, that's not quite for me. I'm gonna look for something a little bit more modern, something a little bit more fresh. But again, the Candela originating in Cuba, it was a great way for cigar makers to make money quickly, especially during the 50s and the 60s, when they were losing ground to the cigarette makers. They had been losing ground to the cigarette makers for a long time, but in the 50s and the 60s, cigar sales really dropped, and they needed to make their money, and they needed to make it fast. So this was an excellent choice, and the fact that the American palate, the American market, thus the American market selection, loved it so much, really, it kind of sent a message of hope for the cigar makers and the cigar industry, in that maybe we can rebound, maybe we can make our way back. So as I'm approaching upstate here, I just want to say that this has been a good experience. It is a well-made cigar. It has very good construction. It has needed no touch-ups of any kind. And that little crack at the top here, no effect whatsoever. Didn't develop, didn't open up really at all. And it remained, for the most part, it remained earthy, general tobacco with some sweetness and zings of pepper. And as I get down now, I'm getting a little bit more pepper, and it's okay. It's obviously did not further the whole craze for green cigars, and what the green cigars that you have here on the market now, 2022, it's still not the norm. It's still an oddity, and a lot of people don't smoke them. In regards to the aroma, which I liked, it still wasn't quite the aroma of a Cuban Candela, which is what I was accustomed to as a kid. and that's what my grandfather smoked. But it's still a very nice aroma. Still very nice. Very good smoke. And like I said, a nice mild cigar for a morning or any other event that you might want. Great fishing cigar, if you want to call it that. This isn't cheap. I don't think it was cheap. I think on the Eastern Coast it was damn near $12, $13. Something of that. Maybe it was a little less because I got it on sale. But nonetheless, look, positive experience. Uh, an oddity amongst cigars in the cigar world. But thank you for joining me and watching this video on the Illusione 888 Candela Churchill. Till next time, folks, on Backyard Cigars.